Get on the grill with Chiles and Smoke. We got the 5 friendly recipes that you should know. Hey.
Hi, I'm Brad Prose, and thank you for joining today. I am the author of the new cookbook, Chiles and Smoke, so I appreciate you coming in and checking this out. Can't wait to talk to you about the book, a little bit about my journey here. So I had 2 really big goals with this book. I wanted to, of course, educate people on how to cook with all different kinds of chilies, from guajillo chilies to serrano chilies to even bell peppers and a lot of different varieties of dried chilies and chilies from around the world. All right, so if you flip to the pantry section here, I'm on page 30. This is the chili powders. This is an example, and there's lots of different rubs and sauces in the beginning section here. What I wanted to make sure of is if somebody's going to spend all that time toasting the chilies, grinding the spices, or blending those different sauces, I want to make sure that you're not left over with a cup or two where you have no idea what to do with them. So throughout the book, I reference lots of different recipes in the headings and also in the very back of the book to make sure that you know that you can use these recipes multiple times. I even have a chili by index in the very back so that if you do have some extra chilies left over or you're just curious to see what you can make, you can research it and look it up right there. So for example, these are 2 of the chili powders that are in the book. This is the light chili powder and this is the spicy chili powder. Both of these are made by grinding and toasting some of the fresh dried chilies conveniently, which you can get at Melissa's Produce. They sell these great big bags of all the different kinds, and I believe all of the kinds in the book happen to be sold there too. Not why I designed it that way, but let's talk about that. So one reason why certain chilies in the cookbook were picked is because I wanted to make sure that they were the most available, widely used chilies as possible, with giving some kind of a variety for the chef. All right, so I've got the grill fired up outside for the tri-tip. Let's go ahead and make the rub for the coffee rub tri-tip. Okay, so I've got all my ingredients here. I've got the tri-tip right here. We've got these 2 gorgeous tri-tips. What we're going to do is grill them indirectly, giving it basically a short smoke bath, but not before we rub it with this. So we will start out with some salt. Remember, the recipe is in the book, in the beginning of the book. We've got some pepper. Okay. This is some, this is some ancho chili. Almost mix it up with the sumac. The sumac has this nice, bright, lemony flavor that really brightens the rub. Of course, we've got some cinnamon and granulated garlic. And you might be thinking, how did I come up with this combination? I'll tell you in a minute. This is ground espresso. Now, if you're using this recipe to smoke something low and slow, like a brisket, I would recommend having a larger, coarser grind, because it's going to give you a better bark. But since we're doing steak, I wanted to go with an espresso grind. And then the weird one, cocoa. So if you think about it, we've got warm spices, we've got some mild chilies, some salt and pepper, and then we're adding cocoa. Probably reminds you a little bit of like mole, which is really part of my inspiration here. I've been working on this rub for a number of years. I used to call it a campfire rub, and you can make that basically if you wanted to by using smoked salt rather than kosher salt, because the flavors in here really taste like a campfire. You've got bitter, you've got smoky, you've got a little bit of sweet, and that sumac is really key in tying these flavors together. Okay, so we've got the tri-tips here, and then what I'll do is I'm going to season these from up above. If you have a chance to season your steak ahead of time, it always helps because it allows the salt from the seasoning blend to draw out some of the moisture. And what happens is that moisture actually dissolves the salt, and through osmosis and diffusion brings that salty juice back into the meat, actually seasoning the inside of the meat, which is really nice. So if you have the ability to, I recommend seasoning your meat ahead of time and then letting it sit in the refrigerator uncovered for at least about an hour. And you will notice that your meats are much more deeply seasoned and you get a better crust. I could have spent a little extra time trimming up this tri-tip and being picky, but for the sake of time, I'm going to get these ready to go and on the grill because they take a bit to cook. All right, so I tried to find a shady spot in the backyard. Arizona's like a spotlight, so it's hard. But anyway, I've got these two tri-tips here. Let me show you how these look. So these have been resting for about 20 minutes or so. I gave them a little bit of time so that you could see the sweat on the top, how they're starting to glisten, the spices are soaking in. So what I'm gonna do is get these onto my grill back here. Let me show you what I've got. Okay, so as you can see, here's how it's set up. We've got the hot side over here. I put a few lump pieces of hardwood so we get some extra smoke. It's flaring up right now because I have the lid off. And then this side has nothing underneath it. And that's going to allow us to cook the meat indirectly. So I'm going to put this on here. And then this is not a set it and forget it type of a cook. You definitely want to come out and check it periodically. You can do this in a pellet smoker. I'm obviously just using a charcoal grill. The whole goal again is to cook these indirectly away from the heat, so we don't want them too close. And you'll have to flip them every so often to make sure they're not getting a little charred on the sides here. So, but again, use a pellet grill if you want. It doesn't matter. You can even do this in the oven if you really wanted to and sear it on a cast iron skillet. I'm going to cover this up. Now, one thing I want to say is with smoke flavor and a coffee rub, you're getting a lot of bitter flavors. So we're going to go ahead and pair that with something bright and vibrant. That's where the shishito pepper comes in. It's going to bring in some nice heat with the lemon from the Gremolata. It's going to really brighten that dish up and tie everything together. So let's go inside and sear off those shishito peppers. Now, for the sake of the video, I wanted to show you a little bit about flexibility. So you do not have to have a grill to make this, although I do, again, think the wood fire flavor is great with shishito peppers. In the cookbook, it teaches you that you would put these on skewers, brush them with a little oil, and throw them right over the fire. Today, I've got a cast iron skillet going back here, and what I'm gonna do is just lightly oil these, season them in there. That way you can enjoy this indoors, outdoors, however you'd like to. Now, the great thing is, of course, Melissa's Produce has shishito peppers. I get them even at the store since they're widely available here. So what I'm going to do is, again, we're just trying to blister these. So we're just adding a little bit of oil, not much. And I'll just use a fork to lightly coat them. Okay, the skillet is at a medium-high heat. I'm going to drop it just a little bit because cast iron tends to have a lot of carryover heat. And then we'll dump these in here and just give them a stir for a minute. You don't want these to have a super loud searing sound. It's not necessary because they don't have water popping on the surface. So this is preheated. It's going to be a pretty high heat, and then every minute or so you can kind of stir them around. You'll notice that they'll start to get nice and toasty. The reason why we do this, you can actually eat these raw. I'd recommend adding some acid into it if you do that, but softening them this way really helps them blend together better in the Gremolata. It makes for a better texture, and then it's not as rough. It's a little easier to eat. Okay, we are back. I switched to some tongs. These are a little bit easier to grab them and maneuver them. And you can see some of these are starting to get nice and blistered like this. That's a good sign. Pretty soon I'm going to start pulling them off, maybe individually a little bit. For the ones that are getting more blistered, like that one, I'll grab it. And you don't really want them overly blistered. All right, so we're going to let these hang out for a minute. They're really hot, so I don't want to chop into them yet. I'll spread them out for just a minute, and let's go check on that steak. Okay, so, oh, these look great. Look at this great dark color from the smoke that was coming off in here indirectly. Let me check the temperature. I'm going to use my thermopen right here. All right, about 106, 107. Yeah, about the same. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and flip these just to make sure that they're getting an even bath. It also moves the parts that were a little closer to the coals away. I'm going to let these go for a few more minutes here. We can sear them in a few, so what we'll do is we'll open this up, get this fire going so we can finish them off. Let me close the lid. Now that's grilling for you. All it took were a couple more minutes and they're pretty much at the target. So let's check this out. About 120-ish. Yeah, right around that 120 mark. And that's perfect. So I'm going for medium rare, so that's a little on the lighter side. So I'll tell you what, I've opened up the vents. We're getting this hot. I'm going to go ahead and start searing this one because it's a little bit smaller. And by the time I do, I can rotate here. So I'm just putting it over the coals. The coals are pretty hot. I opened up the vents just a minute ago. So we'll go ahead and start to sear this. Leave it on here for 30, 40 seconds. And then we'll flip it, and then after a couple flips, I'm going to rotate on here. That way they can be done pretty close. So I'm going for medium rare. I'm going to pull these off around maybe 130 to 135, and then we'll let them rest while we chop up the Shishito Gremolata. So go ahead and flip this. I rotated the camera so you can see it a little better here. Just going to keep flipping these a little bit. I just love how dark this crust gets. It looks so amazing. Just straight from the cookbook. In fact, I actually used this same grill and these same coals to make that coffee rubbed steak that you see in the cookbook. Let me check the temp here. Okay, it's getting there. The small one's there. This big one needs just another minute or two. The small one's good though. Let me just pull this off to the side. That's almost already medium rare, so I don't want to overcook that too much. And the reason why I like to flip is because it controls the momentum of the temperature when you're searing, which is real important because you don't want it to overcook all on one side. You want it to build up some heat on one. When you flip it, it cools off that side and starts building up on the other. It's really good for even cooking. Thankfully, I didn't overdo this one. It was just that little hot spot. So I'm going to let this hang out and rest. There we go. If that doesn't look awesome, I don't know what does. But man, I wish you could smell this right now. You could make this at home, and you should. Well, anyway, I'm going to let these rest, and then we can make the Shishito Gremolata now that the peppers are cooled and these are done. Watch your fingers. Got to curl those fingers in, and you can just chop them. I recommend going slower. I'm doing a lot at a time. And if you want them finer, go back over a second pass. Remember, this is meant to be a gremolata, so it's going to be very similar to like a salsa. And a gremolata is basically an olive oil based salsa where it's got nuts and citrus and some chilies and some herbs. It's a really fresh tasting salsa. And you know I am all about salsas. And I'm sorry if a gremolata is not technically considered a salsa. Please correct me. However, since I associate it with that, I am definitely calling it that because that is how I use it. It is so fantastic on beef. It is fantastic on chicken, on seafood, on pork. This is really a condiment that can go on anything. There are times where I'll just make the gremolata. We can have that with roasted vegetables. It's great on rice. This is a very protein-heavy gremolata too, because as I mentioned, we've got the Shishito peppers, which are highest in protein out of the chili peppers in the book. And then it also has some walnuts. So if you are a vegetarian or you don't eat a lot of beef, this is a great way to kind of supplement your diet a little bit. Yeah, I think it's very filling. Let's put it that way. You're not going to eat this and be craving for bowls and bowls more like you would normally like a tomato-based salsa. So if you're wondering about this knife, get a lot of questions about this too. This is a steel port knife made in Oregon. It is from the former owners of Finex, which was that cast iron, that really cool one that I used earlier. So I like to support small businesses, and just wanted to give a quick shout out to the beautiful knife here. All right, almost done with these, and then we'll jump into the rest of the ingredients. But please let me know if you have questions. This is a great time to ask, and I'm sorry if I've got some subpar knife skills here. I'm just trying to get a lot done and go slow. Kidding. But man, these smell so good. So what would happen if you overcharred these, because it can happen, they will be a little bit bitter. What you can do to counter that is once you make the Gremolata, you can add a sprinkle of salt, you can add a little agave, any kind of sweetener, or a little extra acid will help alleviate some of the bitterness. Another trick I like to do is a lot of times if I'm going to serve a steak with this Gremolata, I will make this ahead of time, because just the essence of time itself, allowing those flavors to marinate together, will get rid of some of that bitterness as well. So let me clear this off real quick. I forgot I had a bench scraper. Here I am doing it manually. Okay, so we've got the Shishito peppers. I've got them in a bowl right here. So to this, we're going to go ahead and add the parsley. This is some washed flat leaf parsley. It does work with the traditional parsley as well. I just find that this flavor, it fits my profile a little more. If you love cilantro, use cilantro. Feel free to mix and match different herbs, mix and match different chilies. This recipe is a guide as well as a recipe. I want to make sure that everybody feels that they can take this as a template and make something super delicious that fits their profile. Not everybody likes grassy flavors, which is what the parsley is. The Shishito peppers are also grassy, so this dish in itself is actually a very earthy dish. You've got the coffee, the sumac, the parsley, the shishitos. There's a lot of different, very intense flavors going on here. So I'm going to scrape this in here. Give the knife a wipe real quick. All right. Okay, then we've got the shallot, and it calls for 1 tablespoon. So what I'm going to do is just cut the shallot in half, save that other half for later. Now, what I like about shallots is they're kind of like a combination of an onion and garlic almost, with their flavor and their pungency. And a lot of times when stuff calls for onions and garlic, I end up using shallots just because I really like the overall flavor, and it's one less thing that I have to cut. So I cut across the core, and I'll cut vertically, and notice that I leave the root attached, and then I'm just gonna mince it very, very fine here. And it is very strong, so you don't need more. This is a little bit more than a tablespoon, but that's okay. A lot of times when I'm cooking, I kind of just start eyeballing it at this point. So, but I swear I measured it for the book. There we go. So, funny story about this recipe, actually. Let me grab my zester. I have a friend. I will leave her unnamed, but if she watches this, she'll know who she is. She tried the coffee rub on the Tritip, and she does not like coffee on rubs. So she tried it, did not care for it, called me and just said, "What's going on?" And she's like, "Look, here's my feedback. I just don't like it." And I said, "Well, did you try it with the shishitos?" And she said, "Well, no, I just tried the steak and I stopped there because I didn't like it." So I told her, I said, "Okay, humor me, try it with the shishito peppers too." So she did, and called me back the next day and absolutely said that it changed the flavor. It really does. And I know a lot of people are kind of iffy about coffee in rubs, especially for steak. I'm telling you that the combination of the two really makes a difference, and it's just a testament to the book and how when you pair the right ingredients together, it can transform the palate. And remember that coffee, there's only a tablespoon in all of that rub. So it's not like it's a coffee steak, it's really just an accent. And I'm carefully chopping these walnuts here. We're gonna add these in. I don't want these too small. There we go. I'm going to show you a little gadget in a second that I really like in the kitchen. Check this out. This is a garlic press. I got this years ago, and it is the best thing ever. You just grab it, press the garlic down. Sometimes you have to do it a couple times. Hope it doesn't fly out like that. And that's it. It's the easiest tool to use ever. If you want it a little finer, you can go back over it and rock it. And what's great is it's stainless, so it doesn't hold that garlic smell. It doesn't maintain that smell. It's super easy to clean, and it gets a great, really fine garlic press. I am normally against one-use kitchen tools, but this thing saves me so much time, especially if you have to crush like 10 of them. All right, so we're almost there. One of the last things here, we're gonna do a little bit of fresh lemon juice. This is my way of cutting them when you don't have a squeezer. If you cut them into a wedge like this, they squeeze really well. Okay, we're almost done. Last things that we need to do, little bit of black pepper. I like a little bit more than a little bit. And we'll add some salt. Now, I recommend just a fine-grained salt here. You don't need a kosher salt, like a coarse one, but you can have that if you want to. I'm not measuring, I know about how much I like. Okay, and then the olive oil. Now, it calls for 3 tablespoons. So that's about how much I start out with. And from there, you kind of go with what you like. Now this is not meant to be like a chimichurri where it's floating in oil. It's really meant to be more of a thick salsa just like this. So I'm gonna add just a little bit more oil, maybe 1 more tablespoon. Now, I used a few extra shishito peppers in my version here today. Okay, here we go. Check that out. That looks awesome. Should we try this? I mean, guess that's kind of the point. It's spot on. I'm not adding anything. Excuse me while I chew. Okay, so we've got the tri-tip here. We can cut the smaller of the two. So what's interesting about the tri-tip that's very important to know is the grain, the way the muscle goes across the grain. So right here, it starts to go across the grain here, and then it changes. So you want to cut across the grain. So right here, the muscle starts going this way. So what I do is I find the middle point. It's kind of like almost like a crescent shape. You find the middle point and cut down there first. And then if you want a really, really nice, normal, traditional steak cut, you take the thinner part and you would cook it as so. So I'm going to go ahead and cook or cut some delicious looking slices here. Oh man, that is perfect medium rare. See what all that flipping does? I'm telling you. Wow, look at that. Look at that. This is amazing. Let me show you. Check that out. There's very little gray band on the outside because we were flipping and controlling that heat. This is going to get a little bit more red as time moves on because as you let steak rest, it gets more red. It's called blooming. And this just looks perfect. Now, for the sake of showing you this one is a little different. It's kind of funny how to cut this. So you would think to cut here, but if you do, the grains are going this way now. So what you'll want to do is flip it to this way. So you can see the grains are going right here. So to have a nice bite, you'll want to cut this way. They're going to look long, of course, which isn't a problem. If you're a hungry guy like me, maybe you want a few of these on your plate. Cut some of these a little thinner since they're going to be longer. Now, tri-tips make for delicious, delicious sandwiches. They make for great tacos if you want to use a tri-tip for something like that too. I personally just love it with lots of salsas and roasted vegetables, but I will not say no to a tri-tip sandwich with a little bit of mayonnaise and a little bit of pickled vegetables and some of this salsa. So you can see this is a perfectly cooked tri-tip. I'm going to take a bite here. This is a big bite. We'll give that a try. Oh. Okay, now I'm going to slide the cutting board this way so we can plate it. And let's put these really nice medallions here. Just let this sit here. Now this steak rested for about 10, maybe 12 minutes. So it is no longer scorching hot. So you can definitely handle it if you like to. Okay, then we're gonna top it with the Shishito Gremolata. Now, if you find that the Gremolata does not have enough salt in it, you could salt your steak right before, but I find that this has a lot of flavor. Does not require that. There you go. Look at that. Would you take a look at that? Wow. So let me know what questions or comments that you have about this. Again, this can be made, of course, on the grill as I did, on the skillet, in the oven. Really focus on the flavors with this dish. I'm telling you, it's fantastic. Thank you again for joining today. I hope that you can clearly tell that I'm very passionate about all the details and nuances with chilies, grilling, and you're gonna see that same passion throughout this cookbook, whether you're flipping through the sauces, the many different types of salsas, and of course the big bad barbecued meats. Give it a flip through. Let me know what you're most excited to try first. Thank you.